The debate on casual versus hardcore MMO gamers has been popping up in several areas that I frequent. Certainly in the response to my RIOT MMO video in the Ashes of Creation subreddit, and several big YouTubers have made videos about it in the last year or two. I thought I would weigh in on this topic a bit. There seems to be a general assumption that there are more casual MMO players than there are hardcore MMO players, and I think that is probably a fair assessment, but let's start with the definition and see if that gets us anywhere. Hardcore references, of course, sex, like seemingly half of all words do, but we can also see that these are very dedicated people. In fact, hardcore is so hardcore that the opposite of hardcore is moderate. Casual, of course, also references sex. Unrelated, but I think the Oxford Dictionary people might be excessively horny. Casual also references people that don't give any fucks at all. Truthfully, both words are overused to describe MMO players, as both words to me are adjectives for outliers, but it is much easier to be casual than it is hardcore. So I'm just going to assume that there are more casuals than hardcores in MMOs, but let's try to back that up with some kind of empiric evidence. Strife in his video on casuals versus hardcore MMO players referenced 3 very old studies and decided to use a 3-hour per day cutoff between hardcore and casual players, since that seemed to be roughly the average daily playtime based on these studies. He also says that a hardcore player will be spending time outside the game learning more about the game, whereas a casual player might not. I don't disagree with these assumptions at all. But still, to me, it doesn't really tell us what percentage of the player base is truly casual. If you use the 3-hour playtime rule as the cutoff, and that is the average playtime, then approximately 50% of the player base might be considered hardcore. I realize the mean for a dataset does not necessarily delineate the exact middle of a dataset, but it tends to be somewhere near the center. To me, I viewed the hardcore crowd as being much smaller than 50% of the population, but let's dig further. One idea I have is to look at World of Warcraft rating progress data. One good thing about an MMO is polished and documented by the player base as WoW is, that you have some decent player data to look at. This blog post takes the total active player numbers from WoWranks.io and the percent of players that have done normal rating from Raider.io and concludes that only 10 to 20% of active players participate in normal raids. Only 8 to 10% do heroic raids. PvP arena statistics are even lower, with only 7.3% having done one 2v2 arena. So to me, I think normal rating might be a decent hardcore cutoff for WoW currently. I think if WoW still had some more traditional rating structures that didn't have various difficulties and just had raids, you would see more people doing normal raids instead of just LFR. But with LFR, many can get adequate gear, experience the content, and not have to join a guild and be on a raiding schedule. So I'm going to guess that a game that might have structures in place to encourage a more hardcore playstyle might have a higher percentage of hardcore players. WoW has become a game that to me is borderline not even an MMO anymore. You can experience most, if not all, of the content without having to even engage with other players in a chat of any kind. Yes, you might have to group for some of the content, but the easier tiers of the dungeons and raids are so easy you don't have to really communicate, and the grouping is automatic. But that sounds like another video idea to me. Is WoW even an MMO anymore? For a video title might get some people excited, I think. Can't wait to do that one. Another bit of evidence we have is a survey done by Limelight with a sample size of 4,500, which is a decent sample size, so to some extent we can trust this data. It is from 2020, so more recent. Something I found interesting is that casual gamers reported playing MMOs the least amount. Casual gamers tend to favor single-player games the most, so the average MMO gamer is more hardcore than the average gamer. Not entirely surprising given the nature of the genre. Another consideration is the average age of the MMO gamer. I have some decent evidence that the average MMO player age is quite a bit older now than it was 20 years ago, with the current age being 36. Check out my video on that if you want to see how I came to that conclusion. Now, most 36-year-olds simply can't be hardcore due to many more life commitments than the average 20-year-old. However, a 36-year-old MMO player probably is very familiar with the mechanics of MMOs, so they might be very efficient with their less available play hours. But still, they simply may not have near as much time to play as the younger players do. So to summarize what we have gathered so far, 3 hours or more per day is probably where hardcore gamers reside, but it's hard to say an exact number. My guess is hardcores are in the 4 to 5 hour day per range since the average is 3, and I view hardcore gamers as elite upper echelon outliers. The WoW rating data suggests a cutoff of 10%, but I think it's probably higher in more traditional MMOs that don't let all of the content be able to be completed without any kind of organized groups with high difficulty tacked on for the hardcores. Those that just want the story and decent gear are not incentivized to join an organized group and actually socialize in an MMO. So I personally think in a game like Pantheon or Ashes of Creation that does incentivize actual communication, the hardcore community might be 20 to 25%. Also, we have pretty decent data that the average MMO player is more hardcore than the average gamer. That is not an earth-shattering revelation for most seasoned MMO players, but worth mentioning. And we know that the average MMO player ages have put some stress on the number of hardcore players that might exist in 2022 versus 2008. Also, I think it's fair to conclude that casuals outnumber hardcores, but I don't think hardcores are as rare as some think, and I also think it is possible to appeal to both in an MMO. Original classic WoW had no shortage of casuals and was not nearly as casual friendly as it is today. While I have voiced some concerns about a potential lack of casual content in Ashes of Creation, the research I did on this video actually quelled some of those concerns. I think both Ashes and Pantheon are not overly catering to the hardcore crowd. I think in Ashes, one thing people always lean on is the PvP always on thing. But the corruption system is very harsh to those that just want to murder hobo all day long. And I think with the massively in-depth crafting system, the very long leveling time that is meant to be a major part of the experience, and not a stepping stone to the real content, I think it is going to be just fine. Also, Strife is aware that he needs to have a game for casuals too. He has said that you tend to see a larger population of casuals than you do hardcore players in an MMO. He acknowledges that he has to have a game that appeals on some level to the more casual audience. Pantheon devs have also acknowledged this. One of the things Ashes and Pantheon have going for them is they are not making a carbon copy of WoW, because we have so many MMOs that have tried that, and it is so hard to compete with a game that is so developed and polished as WoW is at their own game. Also, Ashes and Pantheon are making true MMOs, something an MMO gamer can actually call an MMO with confidence. MMOs do not have to be an either-or affair. It is possible to make an MMO that appeals to both casuals and the hardcore. I think where developers have gone wrong in the past is trying to go all in on appealing to one or the other. WildStar went all in on the hardcore raiding crowd. Guild Wars 2 went all in on the casual crowd. Guild Wars has succeeded to some extent, mostly because it is a very polished experience with excellent combat, but it could have been much more if it didn't get rid of vertical progression and the Trinity. It is also possible that a very hardcore focused MMO could succeed if it truly had a high level of polish. I can't recall a highly polished MMO that was labeled a hardcore MMO, but I think the safer choice is to try to appeal to both. Anyways, that is my take on the casual versus hardcore debate. See you in the next video.